Greetings survivors and friends, I'm SHADOWFRAX and welcome to episode 13 of
Concept LIMBO,
the series where I disinter the remains of designs and features for Rust that are missing, presumed dead, only for them to be added into the game the following week. Seriously though, big hairy kudos to Helk and the team for their recent forays into the land of Limbo, without which we would not currently have the pleasure of tuna can wall lamps, flame turrets, vending machines, fridges, working flaps on our armoured doors, and most recently heavy metal armour and weapon sashes. Shame, I was going to talk about those last two in this episode. With all this in mind, it's now a race against time for me to produce this episode before any more concepts are added, but fear not, there's plenty in the nosebag, and I'm here hopefully just in time to round up my recap on 2016 with a final selection of unused ideas that pretty much all revolve around our characters and their clobber. Without any more fannying about then, let's face the music and dance with the first concept, which we can see if we journey back to devblog number 107 in April of last year, where we caught our first glimpse of a new feature to complement the reworked character models, namely this. No, it's not an instructional video on anti-aging facial exercise techniques, but rather an example of how Blendshapes could be used to pump more life and expressiveness into our in-game selves. A blend shape is basically a technique that allows a single mesh, such as a character's face, to deform into any one of numerous predefined shapes and combinations thereof. As far as Rust is concerned, this was primarily going to be used to indicate a player's state. For instance, if they're hungry or cold, then they'd look depressed. If they're alone in a dark bunker room or just about to be on the receiving end of 50 Shades of Gank, then they'll likely be expressing terror, and for any other time their face would probably just be set to medium salty. It doesn't stop there though, there's quite a bit of scope to explore with this technology, such as randomly generated facial features, something suggested to complement our already quite randomly assigned body parts, the possibility for emotes, or even your character displaying emotions relating to the words you're typing in chat. Yes, that could be interesting. Virtually in the very next breath on the same dev blog, another related feature, and one that I'm itching to see myself, was teased, and that was with this test to see how beards would work with the aforementioned blend shapes. I'd say looking at them they work pretty well, thank you, so let's have them already, but hold your horses, it was actually made clear in the blog that this wasn't an indication of face fungus being a thing anytime soon, but rather just brushing up the system and making it future-proof. It wouldn't just be for beards either, but hair in general, so someday everyone's character could stand to benefit to some degree or the other, depending on gender and hormone balance. Incidentally, combing back through the dev blogs and community updates, I remembered these fashion suggestions from 2015 by community artist Frank Walls, whose work I have featured a number of times already in this series. Oh, the possibilities. A small hint was also dropped at beards and hair later in 2016 with a peek at work on a new shader that would allow for a decent looking crop of fuzz when it's finally implemented. Not to say that this is a particularly new idea though, fur shaders were being played around with as far back as August 2014 on devblog 21, although the results of applying these effects to Newmans at the time was at best harrowing. Now, whereas blend shapes could be used to effectively make our player models appear more alive, the opposite could also be achieved, as this macabre example from May of last year shows. Yes, not only could it be easier to know when somebody has died, but you could also tell just how dead they actually are. In addition to certain visual cues such as buzzing flies, which we've had for quite a while now, the concept of visually rotting bodies could go a long way towards adding another layer of situational awareness. Fresh cadavers could indicate a recent scuffle over an airdrop, whereas a tower surrounded by piles of desiccated husks could be a useful aid in deciding where not to build that starter base. In addition to this, the concept of circling vultures was mentioned, although nothing concrete on that front ever landed, so I won't carry on about it. In the following devblog, corpse rot was given the full body treatment, and that was pretty much the last we've heard about it, or indeed blend shapes in general, to this date. Is this concept merely in a shallow grave, or is it 6 feet under? Only time will tell. Meanwhile, back in the land of the living, and from languishing bodies to body language, something that was discussed on several blogs between April and August of 2016 was how to give our player idols in the inventory screen more room to tell us exactly how we're feeling. A range of states could be expressed this way, such as, "Please help, I seem to be choking on a Lego," I'm suffering from a serious pie deficiency here. I think I may have overdone that forearm exercise, or even that's the last time I'm eating one of your wolf meat vindaloos. Of course, the plan was that these would only be displayed in the inventory screen, and so would really just be a reminder of your current special needs, but we haven't heard much more about them since August, and our player models continue to retain their stoic, stiff upper lip through thick and thin. Now, as I mentioned at the outset, I was going to cover weapon sashes and heavy armour in this episode, but some psychic time-travelling game developer beat me to it. Never mind though, because way back in April of last year, at the same time as the heavy armour was first mentioned, there was indeed another form of protection suggested. Who remembers this? Yes, it may look like a group of dads got bored and decided to try on their kids' homemade Transformer costumes, but this is the cardboard armour. About as durable as an inflatable dartboard in a war zone, especially when allowed anywhere near water, these corrugated monstrosities look decidedly strange when contrasted against the heavy steel plate. But as Paul at Facepunch said, it was mainly meant for allowing players to draw on and see what ideas they come up with. So, what ideas would you come up with? Perhaps with the right skins it could be made to look just like the heavy stuff, or maybe it's perfect for some sort of twisted, rusty game. Leave me a comment, please. Not long ago, we received a much-needed rework to the bone armour, which is a million times easier on the eyes now, considering the old one looked like it was just made out of jumbo dog chews and string, and the deer skull helmet really tops it off. However, whilst the design was being finalised, one member of the community unleashed his creative juices on Reddit and came up with some excellent ideas for a variation on the helmet that ended up actually being modelled. Sadly, when it came to the crunch, it was shelved in favour of the version we have now. Even so, on devblog123 it was mentioned that the human skull could still be an option and that even a bear skull variant was being considered, but to this date they are still in the hatbox of destiny. If you're really desperate, of course, you could always track down a copy of this skin for the metal face mask, but it's just not the same. Now, I've got one last concept that I didn't really know where to stick. Easy, I know what you're thinking, but I had to mention it somewhere because it was modelled and ready, but we never got to play with it, and that was this, the water pump. We saw this design spring up in April of last year, at a time when water was starting to become a more valuable commodity, and indeed now it's even more useful with the advent of farming and the current salt content of human meat. It's a pretty meaty deployable with a footprint approaching that of a pump jack or quarry, and that handle would indicate some sort of manual labour, which I'm not a massive fan of, I must admit. We didn't hear any more about it after the initial mention, but then perhaps it's just being held in reserve for when community salt levels reach critical mass. Who knows? I want to know what you thought of these concepts, so please leave me your ever insightful comments down below, tickle my buttons, and follow me on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and Steam. I shall catch you all in the next Concept Limbo, but until then, keep calm and stay rusty. Cheerio.